breaking news.
Start reading.
Study. Read.
Use your brain.
Reason.
Apply reason.
Reason.
There's a bumper sticker that reads, "God said it, I believe it." My guest Bart Ehrman's reaction to that is, well, what if God didn't say it? What if the book you take as giving you God's words instead contains human words? Ehrman chairs the Department of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He's a scholar of the New Testament and the early church. He was born again at the age of 15 and studied at the Moody Bible Institute. Later, while attending Princeton Theological Seminary, he started to have doubts about the literal interpretations of the Bible.
Dr. Bart Ehrman is the James A. Gray Distinguished Professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he came to UNC in 1988 after 4 years of teaching at Rutgers University. At UNC, he has served as both the Director of the Graduate Studies and the Chair of the Department of Religious Studies. A graduate of Wheaton College, Professor Ehrman received both his Master's of Divinity and PhD from Princeton Theological Seminary. And since then, he has published extensively in the fields of New Testament and early Christianity, having written or edited 23 books, numerous scholarly articles, and dozens of book reviews.
I'd like to see what the lay of the land is, so I'd like to know how many of you would consider yourselves to be Bible-believing Christians. Right, good, okay. How many of you would think that the Gospels are completely reliable? Right, how many of you are here to see me get creamed? Right, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. Well, I have a tall order with this crowd. When I started out in my studies to be a scholar of the Bible, I thought that the question of the reliability of the Gospels was one of the most important questions facing Christians. I, too, thought at that time that the Gospels were, in fact, completely reliable. But when I learned Greek, started reading these Gospels in the original language, started comparing them carefully with one another, grappled with the problems, prayed about the problems, did my level best to deal with the problems, I came to a different conclusion. And all I ask tonight is that you approach this debate with an open mind. I'll be very interested in hearing what Craig has to say about these topics, including this first one. Craig and I have known each other for over 20 years, but we've never debated before, and we've never had a discussion about this issue. I will be interested in knowing whether he thinks there are, in fact, any historical errors in any of the Gospels. And if not, I'll be interested in knowing how he explains that as a historian who knows full well that historical sources always have errors. But if he thinks there are errors, I'll want to know how he decides what an error is, and how we can know if there are a few errors, there aren't a lot of errors in the Gospels. And if there are a lot of errors, I'll wonder how he can say that the Gospels are reliable. Let me tell you my view on these questions. In my view, there is certainly historically reliable information in the Gospels, of course. But there are also pieces of historically unreliable information. This can be seen by the fact that sometimes there are flat-out discrepancies between the Gospels, as you will see yourself if you just read them carefully side by side. Let me give you just a taste out of 1,000 examples. The Gospel of Matthew says that the father of Joseph, Jesus' father, was Jacob. His grandfather was Mathan, and his great-grandfather was Eleazar. The Gospel of Luke says that Joseph's father was Heli. His grandfather was Mathat, and his great-grandfather was Levi. Well, which was it? The genealogies differ. One of the key motives of the Gospel of Mark is that Jesus' disciples don't recognize him as the Messiah until chapter 8. But in the Gospel of John, they call him the Messiah right away, the first time they meet him in chapter 1. Which is it? How could it be both? There are small discrepancies between the Gospels, hundreds of them. Was Jairus' daughter sick, but still alive, when Jairus came to ask Jesus to heal her, as in Mark? Or did she just die before Jairus came, so that he asked Jesus to raise her from the dead, as in Matthew? Hard to see how it could be both ways. The Gospel of John says explicitly that Jesus died on the day of preparation for Passover, the afternoon before the Passover meal was eaten. The Gospel of Mark says explicitly that Jesus died the morning after the Passover meal was eaten. Don't take my word for it. Read John 19 and Mark 15 for yourself. They contradict each other. Or look at the resurrection accounts in the four Gospels sometime and ask yourself, how many women went to the empty tomb? What were their names? Was the stone rolled away before the women arrived or after they got there? What did they see there? One man, two men, or two angels? What were they told to do? To tell the disciples to go to Galilee or not? Did they tell the disciples or not? Did the disciples go to Galilee or not? It depends which gospel you read. You get a different story every time. We should not say that these are a bunch of details and don't affect the larger picture. The larger picture is made up of nothing but details. The big pictures are vastly different too, as you'll see once you allow yourself to admit that the details are all different up and down the line. In my opinion now, the accounts of the Gospels cannot be reliable because they differ in hundreds of ways, both big and small, and they contain numerous historical errors.
Dr. Gerald Dirks, he is a doctor in clinical psychology. Amongst that, he has graduated with honors from the prestigious Harvard University with a master's in divinity, finished seminary school, and the list goes on. Peace be unto you.
And peace unto you, brother. As you mentioned in your introduction, I received a Master of Divinity degree from Harvard Divinity School. I was an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church.
Okay, now break this down for us. What is the Methodist Church?
Well, the United Methodist Church is one of the Protestant denominations in Christianity.
Is that the largest denomination?
No, at one time it was. Back in the 60s, it was the largest Protestant denomination in America. Now it's probably second.
Second? What's the first?
Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist, and then Methodist will come after that?
Probably.
You were filling the congregation, the pulpit. I mean, you were
Yep.
up there, you were preaching and teaching the Bible.
Yes.
But today we're intrigued. We want to know, because when I introduced the show, we talked about these scriptures that were given, revelations to the messengers, and intact, the originals, we believe
Yes.
that these were from the Creator. But the Bible, how do we approach it? What is the Bible that we have today? Is this the Word of God?
Well, I think there's a prior question we have to ask, brother.
Tell me.
And that is, which Bible?
Which Bible?
Which Bible? And when I say that, I'm not saying King James Version versus New Revised Standard Version. That's simply different translations. Now, in the New Revised Standard Version, they go back to earlier Greek manuscripts than the King James Version did, so you get a more authentic translation. But basically, it's different translations. But the reality is that Christianity has never agreed on what constitutes the Bible. So if we look, there's two main parts to the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. If we look at the Old Testament, the Protestant Bible has 39 books in the Old Testament. Now to that, the Roman Catholics add several books, those being amongst others, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Tobit, Judith, Ecclesiasticus, the Wisdom of Solomon and Baruch, and over and above those books that they add to the Old Testament, they add additions to the book of Daniel. They add additions to the book of Esther. That's the Roman Catholic Bible.
Roman Catholic. So it has a total of how many books then?
Well, you'd have to add them up.
Is that around 77?
No, well, not in the Old Testament.
Okay.
In the Greek Orthodox, they add even more than the Roman Catholic do to the Old Testament. So, for example, they add a 151st Psalm. Protestant Roman Catholic Bibles end with 150 Psalms. But they add 151st first Psalm. They add material to the book of Jeremiah that doesn't exist in either the Protestant or the Roman Catholic Bibles.
Now we're talking about that's the Old Testament.
We're sticking to the Old Testament.
Okay, gotcha.
They also add 3rd and 4th Maccabees that's not found in the Roman Catholic Bible. And they add 1st Esdras and the Prayer of Manasseh, neither of which is found in the Roman Catholic Bible.
So these are books that are in one Bible, they're not in the other Bible.
That's right.
Okay.
And then when we go to something like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, we discover a radically different Old Testament. Now, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had a canon of about 46 books, I think it was, whereas the Protestants have 39 in their Old Testament. And they included things such as Jubilees, Ethiopian Enoch, Pseudo-Josephus, the Ezra Apocalypse, and these aren't found in any of the other Bibles that we've been talking about. So in terms of the Old Testament, Christianity has never agreed as to what constitutes the Old Testament. But Christianity has also never agreed as to what constitutes the New Testament. Now, in the Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Greek Orthodox Bibles, they all agree and say there are 27 books to the New Testament. However, the Coptic Orthodox Church adds 1st and 2nd Clement to the New Testament, giving a 29-book canon to the New Testament. The East Syrian or Nestorian Church omits 5 books that are found in the Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Greek Orthodox Bible. They do not recognize 2 Peter, 2nd and 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation. You won't find those books in their New Testament. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, again, a fairly radically different New Testament. They say there's 35 books in their New Testament, and they include things like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Synodos, the 1st and 2nd Book of the Covenant, Calamentos, the Shepherd of Hermas, etc. Books that are not found in any other church's Bible. So Christianity has never agreed as to what constitutes the Bible.